sorry about this. Just getting ready here, so please give me a moment. Okay, here we go. Okay. There we go. Hello, Isaac. How are you doing? How's the sound? Is the sound okay? Great. Great. We're just going to be starting in a couple minutes here, so let me just get set up here. And we'll get started. So I hope you guys are enjoying yourselves today. I don't know what the weather's like where you are, but it's very humid here in Japan. I'm sorry, just give me 1 second while I prepare this computer here. And please let me know if the sound is okay or if it requires a bit of improvement on my end. Okay, great. And this is scheduled to start at 6, so we've got a couple minutes remaining. So let's just wait a little bit and we can go from there. We're going to talk about the film The Red Shoes, Powell and Pressburger's The Red Shoes. So just give me 1 second here while I get ready. Okay. Okay, great. So setting up the chat. Okay, great. So we have Isaac, hello, my friend. Sehofen, hello, my friend. Jeremy Tan, hello. How are you doing? Pavel, hello. And so, no problem, Pavel. Don't worry about it. Thanks for joining anyway. And thanks for your comments, maybe from several hours ago, Pavel. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you, Isaac, for checking the audio. SJS Films, our friend. Matthew McNichol, our friend. Je vous aime, our friend. Bonjour. Ça va bien? And Peter Cacciola, yes. Wonderful to see you. And it's nice to see you all. I hope you're doing well. So let me just make the final preparations here, and we're going to talk about The Red Shoes, Powell and Pressburger's The Red Shoes, 1948. This is the first film by Powell and Pressburger, the Archers, that I'm going to be speaking of in detail. So to be perfectly honest, just between you and me, I am very nervous. I don't know if I'll be able to do this film any justice because, as some of you know already, I'm assuming that you've seen the film, but as you know already, this film is packed. It's chock full of stuff. And so I'm very nervous. I hope I can say something interesting. I'll be relying a lot on you and your insights here. So it'll be very wonderful to hear what you have to say about this film. So just let's give this another minute or so and then we'll start in earnest. So Tim Ho, ohayou gozaimasu. Yes, you know, what was it? You know, I studied Korean for a year in college, but I've forgotten most of it. What? Gosh. 안녕히 하세요. 제 이름은 베프입니다. 좀 뵙겠습니다. But that's all the extent of my Korean, unfortunately. What is it? And 안녕히 계세요. But oh gosh, I'm getting much too old, so I'm forgetting a lot of things. So Octopi Guy, hello. It's nice to see you. And let's see. Great. And yes, Isaac, thank you very much. So before I begin, yes, I'm going to be making more Criterion Collection related videos because for those of us who are able to take care of the Barnes & Noble sale, I know it's a very exciting time. I know it's also not for, it's not something that all of us are able to participate in because I'm not sure. Barnes & Noble's site apparently is not, at least at this moment, allowing orders from outside of the United States even. I think people who are in Canada are having trouble making orders, but I'm not sure about that. But in any event, I'll try to make more videos. And actually, I think there's one that I will post hopefully after this session is over. So I've been doing a lot of box set reviews, or not reviews, but just going over box sets. And so hopefully you might get a kick out of that later. And also, just to let you know, next month I am going to be away for the middle of July. And so I haven't scheduled any live stream film club chats yet. And I've been getting a lot of recommendations and suggestions from you all. And so what I think I might do is, I know people have also suggested I should try to do some kind of poll or something, poll the audience to see what film you all would like to cover. And so let me try to figure out some of those details. And if I can't figure it out in time, please forgive me, but I'll try to do it next time. But I will try to work out something to the best of my ability and let you know as soon as possible with respect to July. Again, it won't be for every week in July, unfortunately, but I will try to do some of that. I've been getting a lot of great recommendations and suggestions for titles. So many great things. I'm surprised also, a lot of people are mentioning Mishima, Life in Four Chapters. I'm surprised. I'm thrilled that that film is getting a lot of love. As you know, I adore that film to bits. But anyway, my friends, let's start then. So let's just go to the chat and we'll go from here. So my friends, welcome to the Film Club live stream of the film The Red Shoes. This is the Powell and Pressburger, Michael Powell, Emmett Pressburger film, The Red Shoes, spine number 4 in the Criterion Collection, although of course it is not only available in the Criterion Collection. There are other ways and means by which one can see this brilliant, brilliant film. The discussion today will focus, I think, on the film itself. I am not so detailed in terms of the production background. And oh boy, the production background is very rich, quite interesting indeed. For those who are interested in some introduction into the production history of this film, might I strongly suggest watching, for example, the documentary that's here on the Criterion channel, on Criterion Collection Blu-ray disc. There's also the great audio commentary, which is more or less spearheaded by the great Ian Christie, who is talking about certain aspects of the film, but it's also a patchwork commentary that has many of the players and the participants in the film speaking, such as Moya Shearer, Brian Easdale, Jack Cardiff. So Brian Easdale, the composer of the music, and Jack Cardiff, of course, the cameraman, the cinematographer, not cameraman, the cinematographer. And also there's Martin Scorsese, who is the great admirer of this film, of course. And so I recommend that you watch the film with that great commentary, because they have so much insight and information about the Archers as a production unit, as a production family, as it were. There's some great backstage intrigue into the Archers and the making of this film, which doesn't which in many ways parallels some of the stories that we see here with the Red Shoes and the ballet company that's headed by the in the commentary. For instance, there's a story about the designer Junger, who is a part of the Archers, and there was a little bit of a clash between him and Hein Heckroth. And of course, Heckroth becomes very important with respect to this film, because he is the designer of the film, and he played, therefore, a huge creative role in the creation of, among many things, the fabulous Red Shoes Ballet Sequence that occupies the middle of the film. And so there is a bit of an interesting backstage clash that is revealed in a certain snippet of information in the commentary, and that, I think, parallels some of the great backstage intrigue, if you will, that we see on display in the Red Shoes. For example, Julian and Livy, there's a little bit of backstage rivalry there. There is also some intrigue with respect to sort of backstage politics here. The dancer Boronskaya and Vicky, and also yeah. So anyway, so I'm getting ahead of myself. So in any event, my friends, that's an example of, I think, how rich the commentary is, and also the commentary does go into the direct participants' experiences with Powell and Pressburger. There is a great moment where the composer Brian Easdale is talking about his impressions of the creative process of Powell and Pressburger, and he actually mentions how Pressburger was always the one who was more of focused on the story details and story aspects, whether things made sense within the context of the narrative, whereas Powell was they sometimes did have arguments, creative arguments, but more or less they always came together and formed the ultimate bond, the professional bond that would create this great legend that is Powell and Pressburger, of course. So again, so my point is that if you want some background information about that and some general information about Powell and Pressburger themselves, I would suggest strongly to take a look at the film while watching or while listening to the commentary, and then we can go from there. So what I'd like to do, therefore, is to frame this discussion more or less focusing on the film itself and what you and I might consider to be some of the major themes and concerns that seem to be on display with this very rich and quite diverse in terms of its scope film. So let's go from there. So welcome. So thank you very much. And I will be going to the chat every now and again and looking at your questions. And so I will, again, spoilers here. So if you haven't seen the film, it's probably a good idea to not watch or participate this live stream. You can always come back when the video is uploaded later, so not to worry. But again, I don't want to spoil the film for you because it does have a lot of surprises. So yes. And I will also be returning to the live chat frequently during this discussion. And so if you have any thoughts or comments, please feel free to talk about them. Let's try to focus on the Red Shoes primarily. You can talk about other films, of course, but I'd like to talk primarily about the Red Shoes, and we can go from there. So, so if you do have comments about other film-specific comments, I'll probably not address those. And once again, there will be, I'm doing the best I can here, but if I miss your comment or miss your question, or I don't mention you, I really apologize. It's not my intention at all. But if that happens, just feel free to drop me a line or maybe leave a comment in the video and repeat your question. And of course, I'll do my best to address it to the as soon as possible. So anyway, my friends, so let's just see here very quickly. The chat room is already great. So hello, yes. Jeremy Tan says, I've seen this film a while back and I loved it a lot. It seems to really be an inspiration for The Black Swan. So Black Swan, so that was the film with Natalie Portman, I think. So yes, oh, it's possible, yes. And Isaac Dunn, thank you very much. SJS Film says, this must be the best looking film of the 40s. Yes, very rich in color, very well designed. We'll try to get to that later. So I agree, SJS Films, completely. Paula, hello. And All Things Film, hello. Gosh, my dear friends, it's nice to see you. Retro Player 72, hello. My friend Wolfgratz, the legend Wolfgratz. Oh yes, speaking of which, you know, this film has a lot of ballet, and I have a very limited knowledge of ballet. My knowledge is limited basically to the information about the production details that are available on this Criterion disc. So my ballet knowledge is very, very limited. Limited meaning it's next to nil. So I will be very remiss in my discussion of that point, but I'll do my very best. Dave B, hello. Yes, Emily, our dear friend, hello. Yes, you've got to check out Emily's blog, everyone. Great. Nazarene Prod, hello. Jared, hello. It's nice to see you. Rob, hello. And Peter, catch you earlier, our dear friend, says, very colorful and beautiful film, but most of the characters seem very full of themselves. Yes, this is very interesting. You know, this is a film that is about the art world. And in fact, I think the point that you make, Peter, about the characters being full of themselves, it does go into that uh, goes into the real life backstage drama that I understand occurs. You know, there's the relationship between Lermontov, the Anton Wahlberg character, and Vicky, Victoria Page, the dancer, the Moira Shearer character. And there is, of course, a kind of maybe for lack of a better phrase, love-hate relationship, kind of. I know it's more complicated than that, but I don't know if you know, but based on the commentary and other materials here, you know, there was a very, how should I put it? There was a quite a the relationship between Michael Powell and Moira Shearer was quite contentious, as I understand it to be. And it's actually described very well by Ian Christie in the commentary. And so I think Ian Christie describes it as being, I think there was a general tendency for maybe some of the dancers who are in the film The Red Shoes, not necessarily being able to understand or appreciate fully the aspect of this being a film version of certain aspects of ballet production, and the ballet dancers, on the other hand, being, and the filmmaker, on the other hand, not necessarily appreciating the fact that the ballet dancers are coming from a different artistic discipline. Although, of course, Powell and Pressburger, of course, have a great fascination and appreciation and love for the ballet. And so I find that artistic rift, if you will, to be very fascinating and to parallel a lot that goes on in the film itself. You know, the characters being full of themselves, I think, is an interesting observation because I think on the one hand I agree, but on the other hand, actually, I would say that the characterizations in this film show also a kind of camaraderie amongst this troupe or this group. And what do I mean by this? Well, let me I guess this would be a great place to start. So, Peter, I will use your comment to jump into this conversation. So, thank you. So, let's talk about the characterizations in general in this film. So, I guess I would respectfully disagree a little bit with what Peter is saying here, at least as far as the way I see it, because the film seems to me to be about a lot of things, but amongst which is the backstage politics, if you will, of this ballet troupe, this ballet company. And the politics always tends to be based upon this notion of right, the production and the art, and people are the artists here. So we have the dancers who are actual dancers, and excuse me, and so for instance, well, I'm sorry, let me just take a step back here. But so when I say backstage politics, for instance, we see the film and Vicky and Julian, it's basically the story of them entering into this company and slowly gaining prominence within the company itself. So they start out and they're essentially nothing, but they slowly build themselves up through certain acts of luck and circumstance and other things that we see throughout the film, until eventually Julian is tasked to compose and conduct the Red Shoes, and then other productions, of course, that occur after the success of the Red Shoes. And then Vicky, of course, on the other hand, is chosen to dance in the lead of the Red Shoes. And so all these events happen, and right beforehand we do have other conductors here. We have the character of Livy, who is seen conducting, and so we can sense perhaps that there might be a rivalry between Livy on the one hand and Julian on the other hand. And then also in terms of the dance side, we see there is also the great dancer Borinskaya, who's played by Ludmila Cherina. So we have her and Vicky. So that seems to form the the potential for kind of artistic rivalries between, for instance, Livy and Julian on the one hand, and Borinskaya and Vicky on the other hand. But in fact, my friends, in fact, it seems to me that the there is no rivalry that's set forth between those two character sets, right? Because when the Red Shoes is premiering, remember there's that backstage moment just before Julian is to go off into the orchestra pit, and Livy actually congratulates him before he goes off, and he says, you know, I wish it was I who. So there's a moment of acknowledgement of Julian's brilliance, and so I think that's a wonderful moment that Livy shows, and also Borinskaya, the dancer, right? She is never seen to be like a terrible, petulant child diva or anything. She is actually very sympathetic, right? She's very friendly with the backstage staff, right? There's that moment with the person at the door, and the picture of her and him, and she asks, you know, was his wife jealous or something? And she is seen in a very sympathetic light. And of course, there's that lovely sort of childish, not rivalry, but there's this childish banter between her and you know, some of the other dancers there, Grisha, for instance, but it's all for fun and play, and they all love each other in the end. So I don't know if everyone is full of themselves necessarily, because there is instead rather a kind of camaraderie that's at play here, and there's a group dynamic that's at play here that I think everyone comes together at the end very nicely. I think one of the great examples also is the relationship between Julian and Vicky, of course, right? Because I think at the beginning, when they are performing or practicing or rehearsing the Red Shoes, there is a bit of a tension between the two of them, right? Because there's that thing about the tempo. You know, she's not matching his tempo, as it were. And so there are some shots of them kind of bickering in terms of the art. But in the end, of course, we know that they actually come together and they fall in love, which forms the crux of essentially what is the second half of the film. And so, yes, so instead of showing rivalry and bickering and argument and that sort of thing that I think could have been the potential for this kind of story, I think on the other hand, it shows this strong unit of this troupe, this ballet company. And we see other characters there as well, you know, Rathoff, right, the designer Rathoff, Albert Basserman, the actor, you know, who shows a great warmth. He also shows a kind of a quick-tempered, artistic-tempered, of course, but he is very human and he's very loving towards other people. Remember, he is the first one who congratulates Borinskaya when during the dress rehearsal of Giselle in Paris, Borinskaya, for some inexplicable reason, she's dancing, and all of a sudden she stops and she announces that she's going to get married. And the person who congratulates her is Rathoff, and so that shows that he is very warm and loving, I think, as a human being. And of course, there's the interplay, Ivan and Lubov, right? So Ivan is Robert Helpman, and Lubov is Massine, the great ballet dancer Massine. And so we see them, and in particular Robert Helpman's character, right? At first, they might not necessarily have been open to the idea of having Vicky be the star and the lead in the Red Shoes. You know, remember what was it? It was in Paris, right, where Vicky is taken to that huge villa where all the heads, the main players of the company are assembled to talk about the Red Shoes. And in fact, that's where Lermontov says, you know, not everyone in this room agrees with me that they think that you are ready for this part. And you see that shot of Vicky's face, and she's just smiling, because I think that's the one where Lermontov reveals that in fact he believes in her. But not necessarily any of the other people in that room. And the people in the room are the Robert Helpman character, Massine, Rathoff. But later, after the performance of the Red Shoes that we see, remember they're at the bar, and I think it's Robert Helpman's character comes to Vicky and he takes her hand and he kisses it as a sign of respect and admiration for the work we assume that she did in the Red Shoes in the performance prior. And so there seems to be this camaraderie that's existent in this film, which I think is really lovely because, right, let me go back to my initial statement here, because on the one hand, the film does deal, I think, with the backstage politics, how people climb the ranks, the rivalry that ensues or potentially ensues, the things that people have to do. You know, there's that kind of painful moment where Lermontov goes to the dancers just before they're off to Paris, and he says, you know, I can't take all of you to Paris. I'm very sorry, but only a number of you can come with us to Paris, but not all of you. And he has to reject some of the people, and then he, of course, takes two dancers, one of which being Vicky. And there's the moments, especially the first half of the film, where Lermontov is very cold to Vicky, and Vicky's having trouble trying to figure out. No one necessarily knows who she is, and she's trying to figure out her place here. But through moments of luck and fortitude and patience, Vicky tends to climb the ranks here. And what I love too is that their climb, Julian and Vicky's climb, is not necessary through any kind of cutthroat Machiavellian tactics, right? For instance, Vicky's climb is essentially down to luck, right? Because remember, she leaves the theater one day and she sees one of her friends in a car waiting for Lermontov, and apparently they have a lunch appointment with Lermontov, and so that's where Vicky and Lermontov have that quick moment where they see each other, and Lermontov basically just ignores her or doesn't really acknowledge her. But Victoria Page, that name sort of lingers, and so that we see the next moment where Lermontov is checking down the list, and he has to decide who can perform and who can't. And I think one of the decisions is who will perform in this sort of charity performance at this theater. Where they're going to play the gramophone record of the recording as the ballet is going to ensue. And so I think that's the assumption is that the name Victoria Page was lingering in his mind, and when he was asked, should this person be allowed to dance, and he thinks for a moment, he said, yes, why not? And so that therefore starts the ball rolling, does it not? Because then that leads to Vicky's being able to dance in that was it the Mercury Theater, I think it was called, with the gramophone record. But she makes quite an impression on Lermontov, because Lermontov is there and you see him going like this. And also, incidentally, that's a great moment in terms of filmmaking, because that's the first time we see not only Vicky dance in a performance, but we also see her, what's the phrase, her turn, the pirouette, I think, or the turning. And we see as her head turns, which is a lovely, she's a great dancer here, by the way, but as she's turning, the camera pans, and she turns her head, and then the camera pans again. So this is the first moment, is it not, of this idea of the subjectivity of dance as being depicted in visual terms in this film. And so that moment is very crucial in terms of narrative, and also in terms of the development of the visual style, which will then grow exponentially as we progress through the film and on to the Red Shoes, of course. But what was I saying? So yes, so I think Vicky's climb, her story, is not due to any kind of cutthroat backstabbing tactics, but rather it's due to luck and due to good fortune. And so therefore I think there is a lot of, how should I put it, goodwill feeling here. It's not a story about backstage intrigue per se, but there is a kind of warmth here, which I really love. It really comes together very nicely. And of course, that is counterbalanced by the towering, chilling presence of Lermontov, Wahlberg's performance of Lermontov, of course. So there is that great tension between them. So, of course, he is not a loving figure necessarily. He tries to be, and there is a sense that people respect him. And remember, there's a moment where he goes to the party towards the second half of the film, and that's where he discovers, of course, that Julian and Vicky are having they are in love. But he goes to the party, and he says he doesn't he never usually participates in these sorts of things, but he does have a sense of humanity about him. I guess that's what my point is. But more or less, he is a very cold, towering figure. So of course that might not necessarily fit in very nicely with my thesis that I'm trying to propose here in terms of the depiction of this ballet troupe. But then again, that tension, I think, forms the backdrop of the drama that will ensue as the film progresses. And so, generally speaking, that's my approach as to the characterizations from a broad level. So. But at the same time, what Peter says about how the characters seem to be full of themselves, yes, there is a lovely artistic temperament on display here. One of the great moments is just before the Red Shoes is about to be performed. Everyone is backstage and they're nervous. Right? The Red Shoes are not there, or someone broke my door. I can't shut the door, or some that sort of thing. So, and I love how Lermontov is like, everything's going to be fine. Don't worry. And he doesn't mind it. All the people are just panicking and stuff. The backstage jitters before the first curtain, so to speak. And it leads to that lovely and so yeah. So maybe there's this idea that people are being shown to be in their full petulant mode, artistic temperament, panic, so to speak. But I think it's all for maybe comedic effect more than anything else. And I think that shows also the cool, icy calm of Lermontov, which is really wonderful in a way, at least at that particular moment. Of course, there are other moments in the film where Lermontov explodes, and we'll get to those in a moment. But what I love, before I go to the chat, let me just end by saying, before I forget, that moment is really great too, because I love that moment between Lermontov and Vicky, just before the start of the Red Shoes, and they're backstage, and Lermontov is just encouraging her, it's going to be okay, and she's saying, I can't forget my entrance, and he's, if you listen to the music, you will remember, and she, in fact, she's okay, and he tells her, this reminds her about, I knew this moment when I first saw you, perform in that Mercury Theater. So there's a great bond between them, and it's a really lovely one, I think. And from there, it's just going to go downhill, of course. But I love that connection between the two. The connection between Lermontov and Vicky is a lovely one, which I will probably try to get to in the next segment, as it were. But before we get to that, let me just go to the comment. So thank you, Peter, for that lovely comment to allow me to jump off on this little bit of a ramble. So I apologize for just rambling on like this. But Peter, thank you so much. So just going through here. So Solitary Ronin Films is here. Hello. David Pryor is here. Hello. Great. And All Things Film says, I'm not going to knock the film, at all, but it's not just my cup of, it's just not my cup of tea. No problem, my friend. And that's great. It wasn't necessarily a film that I particularly loved when I first saw it too, so no worries, my friend. I'm glad you saw it though. Thank you. And Paul Emery, yes, hello, my friend. Great. Je vous aime says, I can say that The Red Shoes is my favorite movie of all time. To my mind, every second of it is a masterpiece. Wow. What a comment. Je vous aime. What a comment. Arrogant Samurai, good evening. Yes, I hope you're well, my friend. Thank you. And Arrogant Samurai, let's thank Arrogant Samurai for that lovely caricature that he drew of me with the glasses and the collared shirt and everything. I love it. Arrogant Samurai, a great artist and a great friend. And man, Arrogant Samurai knows his stuff. His film knowledge is exquisite. Oh, gosh. Yes, Wolfgratz, very good. I think we will all agree on that, Ian. So Wolfgratz is responding to All Things Film here. And I'm not sure about the story either. I know most people love it, especially Daisuke, and I'm hoping to gain insight. So Wolfgratz, this is great about the story. Let me just comment here before I forget, because this is very important. I actually think that the weakest element of this film, and please forgive me, this is not in any way trying to disparage anyone who loves this film, but when I say, well, let me just not, weakest element. Okay, the weakest element I think of this film is in fact, I think, the love story between Julian and Vicky. And I think also more or related to that also is the story of Vicky. And now let me explain that because I don't want to sound like I'm dismissing their stories, which I'm not. I'm not dismissing them stories, but I think the reason why I find those aspects of the film to be the weaker elements of the film are that, for me anyway, I never feel like I get a sense of Vicky's struggle. I know that she wants to be a dancer. I know that she yearns to be a dancer. And in fact, her love of dance seems to parallel that of Lermontov's love of the ballet, right? Lermontov described the ballet as being his religion early in the film, Lady Neston, if you recall. And also when the two of them meet for the first time over champagne cocktails, and he asks her, why do you want to dance? I'm paraphrasing here. He asks her, why do you want to dance? And she says, why do you want to live? And he responds, I don't know, but I must. And Vicky says, that's my answer. So automatically or immediately we see that Vicky loves dance. And the implication here is that she loves dance almost as much as, if not more than, she loves life. And so we sense her real love and passion for dance, of course. Excuse me, here, there's something in my eye. Excuse me. So, excuse me. I'm sorry about that. Something just flew into my eye. Sorry about that. So what was I saying? So yes, we do get her sense of her passion for dance, but I never feel like I get a sense of her kind of struggle towards becoming a dancer. When we first meet her, she's pretty much a kind of she knows how to dance already. She's already a developed dancer in her own right before we even meet her. And then even when she enters the company, we do see her struggle a little bit, but we don't necessarily see her struggle in the sense of any kind of rivalry with Borinskaya, for instance. We never see her struggle. I mean, it's almost, at least the way it's depicted in the film, she then becomes the center of the attentions of Lermontov after Borinskaya announces that she gets married. So this is to say that I think I'm not necessarily with Vicky all the way, because I don't get a sense of her struggle. And also, too, we don't get a sense of the relationship between Julian and Vicky, right? Because we see the relationship as professionals, kind of, during the rehearsals of the Red Shoes. There's that moment on the balcony early on in the film at night when the two of them are together and they're talking a little bit. But that's the extent, I think, of their sort of intimacy before they fall in love, of course. And also there are some moments when the two of them are together at breakfast, and Julian is tasked to play the music of the Red Shoes for Vicky as she's eating breakfast. And they're talking during those one exchange about music and dance and the importance of one over the other, and which is more important. Of course, for Julian, perhaps it's more important that for the music, but for Vicky, the dance is more important. And in fact, that kind of music-dance rivalry, so to speak, it occurs at the very beginning when the students come and watch the Heart of Fire performance. Professor Palmer's students, the Heart of Fire performance, and also the admirers of Borinskaya sitting together on the balcony there, and so you've got this lovely rivalry between the music aficionados and fans on the one hand, and the dance fans, the balletomanes on the other. So that there's that lovely rivalry there that occurs during these early scenes, of course, between Julian and Vicky, but we never see their romance blossom, right? we are actually as surprised as Lermontov is when we discover later on, much later in the film, that they are indeed in love and they are an item, and then suddenly we see them together, like on a horse cart or something. So yeah, so that's as much a surprise as me. So I don't necessarily feel their story necessarily because I'm not privy to their, because that might be how the story needs to go, in terms of a story convention. And we do see the foreshadowing of this. Of course, Boronskaya's story foreshadows Vicky's story almost to a T, right? Boronskaya is the prima donna dancer in the company, and then she announces that she is going to get married, and then she is rejected by Lermontov, and then she leaves. But then Lermontov tries to win her back, so to speak, and she does return to the company, that sort of thing. So that is a foreshadowing of Vicky's story almost to a T. But and so therefore, Boronskaya's story being a foreshadowing can help us to understand that Vicky will probably also fall in love as well, and which is in fact what happens. But I don't get a sense of the developing romance between Julian and Vicky, and so I find that aspect to be one of the weaker elements. Now I understand that the later, the 1970s novelization of the Red Shoes by Powell and Pressburger actually goes into certain details of the romance, the developing romance that the film does not. And so I think that's a very interesting choice that the Powell and Pressburger made in the preparation of the novelization. But that is certainly something that is not present in the film. But does that mean that the film is a weak film as a result? I don't think so. It might affect the drama that occurs at the end there, when you have the three principals in the backstage dressing room, and basically Julian Lermontov are just fighting over the soul, if you will, of Vicky, or even the three of them, Vicky, Lermontov, and Julian are fighting, three of them fighting over the soul of Vicky or something. So that there might be some, maybe in the relationship between Julian and Vicky as the filmmakers would like me to, but that moment actually doesn't lose any potency for me, because ultimately what this film is about, and what I think makes it so powerful, is not necessarily the romance, but the overpowering seductive nature of art, here exemplified in the world of ballet, and the struggle, the way that Ian Christie describes it in the commentary is great. The seduction, sacrifice, and luck that is involved. All that is swirling at that moment, that climactic moment among the three of them there in this dressing room at the end, the climactic scene. So yeah. So and Julian, or the Julian Vicky romance, while itself it might not necessarily be as fully developed as I would like, it does serve as the kind of example of the poles that are being established in this film, right? The dichotomy, the struggle, the conflict that's being established in this film. And granted, it might seem to be a bit oversimplified, but at the same time, I think there's something to be said here, right? So the what I'm talking about here is the dramatic conflict that's being established between art and love, right? So Lermontov says it very, what is it? He says, I want to. It'll be absolutely clear here. So he says, you cannot have it both ways, right? So this is the moment where, after Boronskaya announces that she's going to get married, we see later in the backstage with the shadows on their faces, Lermontov talking to Grisha, right? And Grisha says, you can't alter who relies on doubtful comforts of human love will never be a great dancer. And Grisha says, you can't alter human nature, but Lermontov says, no, but maybe you can ignore it. And so this sets up the tension between art and love, and the idea being you can't have it both. You can't have both things at once, which is, I think, I don't know, in real life, I'm not sure. I'm sure great artists still can fall in love, I'm sure. So I'm not an artist, so I don't know exactly what that is. But I think the point is that right, it's this idea of what devoting one's all to one thing versus the other. And from the point of view of Lermontov, who is this obsessive artist who believes nothing except his religion, which is his art. There can be nothing else, right? For other people, of course, there is room for love, right? I think we see people who are very accepting of the relationship between the two of them. So there's nothing wrong with that per se. And in fact, some of the close associates of Lermontov disagree with him with respect to Vicky and Julian's romance, but not for Lermontov. So, and because Lermontov is basically the main character in this film, at least in my opinion, that is the dichotomy that's set up. That is the tension that is set up. And I can also see how that might be criticized as being overly simplified, but in fact, I think it makes the drama very clear and very precise, and especially when we keep in mind that this is more or less Lermontov's view of how art should be conducted. Then we can accept that. At least I can accept that because, Lermontov's view is not necessarily the world's view, at least the world as it exists in the universe of the Red Shoes. And so, yes, what was I saying? So, yes, hopefully, maybe that might address the comments that I think Wolf Gratz and All Things Film were considering there. But I don't know. Again, let me just return to the chat here and then go from there. Okay, so here we go. So Solitary Ronin and Je Vous Aime, I think, are taking the initiative here in the conversation about that point, as well as others. So really great. So sorry, I'm just going to go back and forth here. Okay, so all right, so great conversation here. Oh gosh. All right, so Je Vous Aime says, it's the best film about opera, ballet, and music. When I went to Monte Carlo, it was important to me to see the opera and that stairs where Victoria Page was. Yes, the stairs. So are you referring to, okay, so the stairs. Are you referring to the stairs that she's going down at the end there with the, with the feet? Yes. If so, that's really brilliant. One thing about the Powell and Pressburger films, they have a way of showing characters running downstairs. My goodness. Oh man. Yeah, I love that shot. How did they do? I mean, the commentary describes how Jack Cardiff gives comments about how they filmed that, but there's like a rotating staircase. I think that I'm not sure. It's an amazing moment. But Spruce, hello. So Spruce says The Red Shoes is one of my favorite films. So visceral, yes, and we'll get to that in a second, especially in the context of the Red Shoes ballet itself. Wolfgratz says, I agree with Isaac that Wahlberg's performance is masterful, but I can't say it elicits any sympathy from me. I don't think it's supposed to, actually. I mean, there are moments where it might do, but I think it's not. I think he is supposed to be sometimes sympathetic, but he's also like this. I mean, it's an oversimplified description, I know, but he is the villain of the piece. He is the villain of the piece, and the idea being that he, at least according to production, it seems like his character was modeled after Diaghilev, the famous Soviet Russian ballet impresario, the Ballet Russe company, a very famous ballet company, and in fact that has connections with Massine. So there's a direct connection with this film and Diaghilev, which is very interesting. And it's interesting how Massine then plays the dancer who is in the company that is led by Lermontov, who is supposed to be modeled after Diaghilev. So it's really fascinating. But what was I saying? So, but also Lermontov is apparently modeled also after like Alexander Korda and J. Arthur Rank, and so these sort of producer moguls, if you will. And that's why you get these scenes not only of Lermontov being the stern impresario, head of the company, but you also see him acting as like a producer, with telephone calls and talking with reporters about what's the next performance, etc. So, and eating breakfast while he is essentially auditioning Julian towards the beginning there, and the grapefruit and the way he dresses, and there's very regal and all that, and so. Apparently he's more sympathetic, and he's supposed to be obsessive, very obsessed with his art. Again, his art is his religion. And it's an interesting thing. If you listen to the commentary, Martin Scorsese is heard saying, he loves the obsession of Lermontov. And I think that's an interesting comment because I think this is in the scene where Lermontov is basically kind of caressing that statue of the foot, when he's describing the red shoes for the first time to Julian. But Lermontov, so Martin Scorsese is heard to say that he likes the obsessive nature of Lermontov. And I think that's interesting because if we understand Martin Scorsese to be a film director, and in fact Ian Christie also alludes to this, his Lermontov's story as an artist might not necessarily be unsympathetic towards for those artists who might sympathize with the way Lermontov is depicted as trying to put together this work. I mean, it's not a complete parallel, I know, but there's this famous story about Alfred Hitchcock, and the making of Vertigo, and it's almost parallel, right? And his relationship with Vera Miles, and what happened with that story. And I always recall that story whenever I think of Lermontov and Borinskaya, and then later Lermontov and Vicky. And so there does seem to be, perhaps potentially, who knows, some kind of real life potential for the kind of artistic treatment that Lermontov dishes out. But anyway, excellent comment as always, Wolfgratz. Yes, Isaac Dunn says, I actually have a problem with the film, and I don't think that's a bad thing. And basically, because of the reason which I just mentioned here, which is his obsessive nature isn't necessarily supposed to be all villainous, which is why I said earlier that while I said he is the villain of the piece, I think that's an overly simplified term. I don't think he is the 100% villain in the sort of stereotypical sense of that word. But so I think your approach to the Lermontov character, Isaac, I think is quite sound. I don't know. I think that, for instance, his final speech to the audience after what's happened to Vicky at the end there with the train, I think is very moving. It's he's shouting. He's overly compensating for his disappointment. And what is his disappointment? He is shocked for some reason, but you never really get into his head about why he's shocked. You can see there are tears forming in his eyes. Is he shocked about the death of Vicky, or is he shocked about the death of his ballet, or something else? I mean, one, I think, is a much colder view of the world than the other, of course, but there are so many possibilities and interpretations there with Wahlberg's performance, which I think can fully support what Isaac, our friend here, is saying. So well done, Isaac. I agree with you. Let's see, just keep me. Justin Peterson, hello. It's amazing how the modern dancing elements still feel. It's amazing how modern the dancing elements still feel, and that long performance sequence is just magic. Yes, I agree. Yes. Okay. And Big Lebowski, and Yarny Paulos. So, hey, Daisuke, love this film. Such an impact on me that whenever I see a pair of red shoes in an article or documentary, now I connect I now connect that image with this film. Yes, yes, red, the color red. The colors in this film are just exquisite and divine and beautiful. Moira Shearer's red hair, that beautiful blue dress gown that she wears before she goes to the villa, and they're talking about the red shoes. The colors here are just exquisite, but of course the red shoes. They make all the pairs of shoes in order to choose which shade of red that they like. Brilliant. Oh gosh, thank you so much for that comment, my friend. Yes, gosh, sorry, I'm skipping over the comments here. It's great. Je vous aime says, one of my favorite scenes is the rehearsal scene where Julian is directing a small orchestra with a Chopin song. It proves that we can feel the passion of music in every kind of situation. Yes, apparently the character of Julian is very interesting. Maris Goring apparently modeled many of the aspects of his performance on Sir Thomas Beecham, and so there's that. You remember that moment? I love that moment when he's in the orchestra pit there. Early in the film, and he's saying, he says to the trumpets, he says, what's that note there? Is that an E flat or an E natural? And the trumpet person says, the performer says, oh, it's an E flat. And, and Julian corrects him, saying, I think it probably work better if it were an natural, don't you agree? And that is his way of breaking the ice, so to speak. And apparently that is modeled after a real event that happened with Sir Thomas Beecham, because he was a very larger-than-life figure in real life. And speaking of Je vous aime's comment, I love the moment where we get Julian going to the orchestra pit just as he's about to perform the Red Shoes for the first time, and then he does his conducting, and the way his chin kind of jiggles, and he does that thing with the baton. It's so great. It reminds me so much it feels like kind of a Sir Thomas Beecham kind of thing going there. So I love that. I love his acting and the way he's conducting, and it's great. Incidentally, there's another moment that's very telling. I love also the moment, while I'm on the topic, is when we're also seeing him later in the film when he's conducting at Swan Lake, and we see that little when he almost gives a kiss to Vicky during the performance, which I think would never happen. Like, my goodness, why would he do that? Why would he do something so ludicrous during an actual performance of Swan Lake? Oh gosh, he must have really been in love with Vicky at that time, but oh well. And I love that too, because that's the exact moment where Lermontov sees the two of them. And Lermontov doesn't complain about Julian, he complains that Vicky looked at him during the performance. And so, oh gosh. So in fact, I think, yeah, that makes me sympathize with Lermontov a little bit, because what conductor in his right mind would actually do that? I don't know. Maybe some of you know that, but if there are some real life examples of that, please let me know. But I'm just saying that in jest. I love. I love the performance of Marius Goring here. I think his acting is superb. Je vous aime. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup pour votre comment. Nazarene Prod. So let's see. Julian, as it goes on, does become a weak link. His ego gets the better of him at the end. That causes havoc. Yes, Nazarene Prod, I agree. But also, don't forget Vicky's too. Right, Vicky does make the choice to go back to Lermontov, which forms the final conflict between the characters that leads to the ultimate tragic conclusion, does it not? So Julian has a lot to do with that, but Vicky also has a lot to do with that, and Lermontov too has a lot to do with that. So there we go. RetroPlayer72 says, I love this film. It shows how the obsession for perfection can overshadow what makes us human. The ironic thing is the movie itself is close to perfection, especially for its time. That's a very interesting way of putting it, RetroPlayer72. I love the way you've worded that. Yes, perfection. Yes. It's very interesting the way you put it, this idea of perfection in art. Well, it's very interesting. I love that. So just scrolling through the comments here. Okay. Paula says, I agree with everyone on the beauty of the film. Such a gorgeous film to watch. I also loved Anton Wahlberg's performance. He steals every scene he's in. Yes, I agree. He's for me. He is the star. He is the central performance of this film. You know that moment. Gosh, there's so many great moments. Thank you, Paula, for mentioning Wahlberg. But there's so many moments that Wahlberg is so overpowering in this film. It's amazing to me. Even the way he's just eating breakfast, I can't take my eyes off him. When we're supposed to be focusing in on Julian, but I'm just so focused on like the grapefruit or something. The great moment, of course, is where he gets the telegram from Dmitri, which reports to him that Julian and Vicky have gotten married. Remember that? And he's seen in his hotel room alone. It's dark, and his face is almost green, and he's got that kind of, I don't know, that outfit there. I'm not sure what it is. It's a cloak or something, or velvet or something. But he's saying no, no, and he suddenly bursts in this great rage and breaks the mirror. And it's a wonderful thing, right? It's not an actual break, but there's a cut there. There's this almost subliminal edit, and that's a really lovely, shocking moment. And the break of the mirror is just so perfect. It's the breaking of the mirror, and the commentary makes a great point of this. It's almost like the beginning of the end. He's broken the mirror, so he's going to get nothing but bad luck from here on out. And indeed, in terms of the film language, that's in fact what happens. What a marvelous moment that was, a marvelous moment among many marvelous moments of Wahlberg there. Wonderful, wonderful. Oh, and I love the way that he's just watching. When we see shots of Wahlberg as Lermontov just watching from backstage with the dark shadows on his face. And he, for instance, when he's watching in the Mercury Theater, when he's seeing Vicky perform for the first time, you see his hands like this. Or he's watching from the shadows as Julian is rehearsing the Heart of Fire overture with the orchestra an hour early, and Livy is coming in, and we see Livy kind of shocked. Why is he rehearsing with these people? But we see Anton Wahlberg just looking in the background, and I love that, because that shows the power of Lermontov, and the way in which he is just overseeing everything, just his look. And yes, speaking of his look, the way when he walks outside and he's got that dark, lugubrious suit and so sunglasses, those overbearing, huge sunglasses that just make him look almost monstrous and cold. And in fact, people remarked about this, which adds to the sense of he really stands off from the rest of the cast, and it creates this aura about him, which is amazing. That aura of Anton Wahlberg is just stunning. And it's amazing to think also, I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail, but if you think of Anton Wahlberg's performances in earlier Powell Pressburger's films, The 49th Parallel and The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, it's really, really an amazing a performance that he gives here, Anton Wahlberg. Just amazing. I think one of the great performances ever, for my money. Excuse me here while I take a drink of water. So my throat is a little bit dry. So thank you, Paula, for that great comment. Yes. I was going to say something. Sorry about this, but speaking of foreshadowing, I forgot to mention this also. The foreshadowing in this film is also very key. I mentioned foreshadowing with respect to Borinskaya and Vicky, but we also see some foreshadowing visually, do we not, in terms of the smoke and the steam of the train, which is unfortunately going to foreshadow what eventually happens to Vicky and her death in the train, because whenever there are some key moments in the film where we see Vicky and steam from a train. So the first moment is when Vicky and Julian are together on the balcony for the first time, and they're talking, shouldn't you be in bed or something like that. And it's the first moment where there's a little bit of the potential of intimacy between the two. It's not full-blown love, of course, but it's just a closeness between them that is outside of the context of performance and rehearsal. Incidentally, that's a moment also where we see a floating piece of newspaper, which will come in later, of course, in the ballet. But we see the two of them standing there over the balcony, and then we see shots of wisps of smoke or steam, which is supposed to suggest the passing train. And of course, I think that's the place, is it not, where she actually jumps to her death. So, yeah, so it's a really I mean, it's a visually beautiful but ultimately very tragic bit of foreshadowing. We also see bits of smoke and wisps of steam in the background as she is talking to Lermontov on the train, in the train carriage. So again, this idea of smoke or steam that is associated visually with Vicky will serve as a kind of visual foreshadowing that foreshadows, unfortunately, her death. So anyway, sorry about that. Yes. Great, great. Je vous aime says, the rehearsal scenes are very important in the film, more than the famous ballet scene for me, and it's the best way to see the emotions of every characters and their relations. Yes, I agree, actually. The rehearsal scenes are very great. Incidentally, one of the great details about one of the rehearsal scenes that I love, it comes not before, but actually it comes after the Red Shoes performance. It's the rehearsal scene. It's not really a rehearsal, but it's a practice scene, really, of Massine and right, Lubov, Massine character, or Lubov character, Massine, the great artist Massine, and he's dancing alone, and there's a spotlight on him. Remember, and this is the moment where Lermontov then comes in and announces that Julian is going to leave the company. But I love that moment because it's just him and dance and the spotlight, and the spotlight, as you know, is reminiscent of the spotlight as it's used in the Red Shoes ballet performance itself. It's not used throughout, but it's used. It's such it's a kind of a one-on-one moment with Massine, who was apparently well on in years when this film was made. So he was over 50, which in ballet dancing terms is you know. It's not young, so as a ballet dancer. So, but he was still showcasing his skills very prominently, I think. And although I think there's some I don't know, reasonable amount of, not criticism, but there's some mention here on the commentary track, I think by Maurice Shearer especially, that addresses some of the choreography that he showcases as the shoemaker in the Red Shoes performance. It tends to be a little bit maybe too much or a little bit overcompensating. And also there are stories about how Massine would always be the first one up in the morning at the bar before everyone else. And there was this great kind of, not great, but there's this little bit of a rivalry between him and Robert Helpmann. And Robert Helpmann, who was younger, would kind of make sly jabs at Massine's age and stuff. But so thinking of that in mind, I love that little moment with just him and the spotlight. So it's very great. Yeah, so just going through the comments here. Oh yes, Emily Holland says, I really like the moment before the premiere when Julian comes in and says, dance whatever tempo you like, I'll follow you. Yeah, so that's the moment where they're kind of together. And Emily, yes, we also learn later that it was indeed during the Red Shoes that the two of them fell in love. And so perhaps that could be an indication of the two of them coming together. But of course, it doesn't have to be. I think more broadly speaking, it just shows the kind of camaraderie that exists amongst everyone before the show is to go on, right? Lermontov is seen to be very human at that moment. Livy, as I mentioned earlier, congratulates Julian. And he says, I wish it was I who could have done this, or something like that. So, yes, Emily, what a great observation you make there. Fantastic. Yes. And Rob says, I laughed out loud when he said that. Yeah, it's a funny, it's pretty funny. Yes, the camera work too. So Paula says, and Paula and Justin are talking about the ballet sequence. So we've got to talk about this because it's probably the centerpiece of the film in many ways. And I think it is an example of the out and out outrageousness of this film style. And I mean that in the most positive, complimentary way I can. This film, I think, is just out and out bonkers in terms of its visual style. It just goes, it goes ballistic in terms of its visual reach. And I love the film for it. And I think this is exemplified most in the ballet sequence. Now, what do I mean by this? So, okay, so again, I'm not an expert in the production history of the Red Shoes, but I know that this is a sequence that was more or less designed visually by Hein Heckroth. The choreography was supplied principally by Robert Helpman, although the choreography for the shoemaker was provided by Massine directly. And of course, we have Morsher as Victoria Page performing the lead in the Red Shoes. And we have the music, Brian Easdale, and it's conducted by Sir Thomas Beecham. And all these other elements shot by Jack Cardiff. So all these elements by the main players of the cast and crew, as it were, come together to create this sequence, and of course headed, of course, by Powell and Presper, of course. They come together in the sequence, which starts off as a kind of direct shot of what appears to be a stage. It's interesting, we never see shots of the audience watching the performance. We always experience the performance itself, and it starts out as a kind of performance too, because it's like the environment feels like a kind of stage-like environment, but it slowly grows. It grows and evolves almost exponentially to the point where it seems to explode in bursts of like firework intense creativity. We've got these sequences, and I'm not a dance expert at all, but we've got these sequences at the beginning which almost remind me of like American in Paris, in terms of the costume and design, and people are in like suits, and it's like a fun time, like a jazz age type of thing. And then we get the shoes themselves, and we've got the creepy aspect of the shoemaker, and then we've got the shoes. And what's amazing here, we suddenly get, slowly but surely, integrated into the ballet sequence, not shots that maintain the illusion of a film performance of ballet. We don't get aspects that maintain the integrity of performance on stage, but rather we get elements that introduce the notion of film language into this performance, and that is stunning to me. So what do I mean? So specifically, we see, for instance, a moment where the lead is imagining her wearing the red shoes, and we see impositions of the image of Vicky dancing over a shot of the shoes at the beginning. They're on the left-hand part of the screen, and then we see, of course, the way in which the shoes tend to have a life of their own, and what the way she puts on the shoes. That she doesn't put on the shoes; she just jumps into the shoes, and they just suddenly lace up. And we see moments where slow motion is occurring, where suddenly she's in this hallway of like cellophane colored, like surreal, almost psychedelic wonder. And then people are falling down, falling apart, and then we see shots of her and her close-up, which is this moment here, which is depicted here, which is a key moment in the middle of the Red Shoes performance, right? Because this is the moment where she sees the shoemaker, but it's the shoemaker silhouetted in black. And in the background, we see not any staged decor, but we see background lights. This is very important, because then suddenly that image of the hands held high like that, suddenly becomes an image of Lermontov dressed in his attire. And then it becomes an image of Julian dressed in his attire. And then suddenly she runs into the image of Julian, almost superimposed. And then suddenly she's in this, like, it's described as kind of a Salvador Dali-like landscape of of like a new world, and she's suddenly enveloped in a new world, and it becomes this thing that is not a performance, but it explodes outside the realm of performance into the realm of the fantasy. And this is cinema. This is the power of cinema at play. Breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking. It's been said that but it becomes a kind of subjective view of performance from the view of the dancer. Here it's Vicky, and that explains, of course, why Lermontov and Julian appear. I mean, there's also a moment later where Julian emerges from the orchestra pit and actually embraces her, and then suddenly there's an ocean behind her, and then there's that lovely moment where it's the dance with the newspaper. Oh gosh, and that reminds us of the way the newspaper was used earlier in the film on the balcony. And the newspaper turns into the dancer, and of course there's that lovely dance between the two of them. So, oh gosh. So therefore, it's been said that this is sort of a subjective view from the viewpoint of the dancer. And so it's not a performance per se, but it's the psychological imprint of things that are affecting her psychologically and emotionally that are being manifest into what she's seeing visually, and that is depicted in visual cinematic terms. So the men in her life are basically trying to dominate her in this pose, and they are associated. Even Julian is associated with the kind of demonic nature of the shoemaker at this time. Although it's important to point out that when she runs into the image, it's the image of Julian that she runs into, not Lermontov, but it's Julian. So that might suggest where her heart is at that particular moment, right? Because after all, we are told later that it was indeed during the Red Shoes that the two of them fell in love. So I don't know, make that what you will. But I think great, and the dancing is great, and I'm not a musician, I'm not a dancer, so I'm from a very layman's terms perspective, I think it's just phenomenal. But as a cinematic visual treat, it seems like Powell and Pressburger are firing on all thrusters, because they are taking something that is ballet, but they seem to be infusing film in a way that augments the experience. Now again, I'm not a ballet expert, so maybe people who are into ballet might be offended by that comment that I made, and I apologize. I don't mean to disparage the world of ballet. It's just because I don't understand it fully, because I'm not expert in it. But if we're talking about, let's say, the topic of filmed ballet or filmed art, I think there is this idea here that film language is being employed in such a way so as to create this almost three-dimensionality in visual terms of a true artistic expression. And indeed, it is frenzied, it is surreal, it is baroque, it is nonsensical. And yet it is beautiful, it is ornate, it is soothing, it is calming, and it is sparkling with joy and energy all at the same time. So not only do we get a visual treat for the eyes and the ears and all the senses, not only do we get a wonderful example of dance and music intertwined into one, not only do we get a feast for the eyes, but we also get a full, rich tapestry, do we not, of the richness and complexity of all the themes that are going on all at once. There's the beauty and the ugliness of it all, the wonder and the strain of it all, the tension, the struggle, the romantic sexual tension, perhaps, as exemplified by the actual direct appearances of Lermontov and Julian, precisely. And we get the moment of sheer confusion and terror and life and death. Everything is here, and this is the Red Shoes. Not only the Red Shoes performance, but also the Red Shoes the film, because I think everything is there in the film. And so it's almost like a kind of microcosm, if you will, of the themes and issues that I think are at play in the larger context of the film, The Red Shoes. So I think that film, that ballet, which is almost like a film within a film, is so important and so wonderful to the context of the world that these characters inhabit, as created by the players here, in particular Powell and Pressburger. So yes. So anyway, let's just continue with the chat here. Okay, so well, just give me 1 second here. Sorry about this. Just 1 second here. I have just computer issues. Let's see. Sorry about this. Just give me 1 second. There's always some technical issues on my end. All right. Sorry, there's a little bit of a technical issue on my end, which I've just fixed, so I'm very sorry. So let me just go back to the chat, and we'll go from there. Okay, so Solitary Ronin Film says, maybe Powell stared at a lot of broken mirrors too. I think you're referring to the broken mirror scene with Lermontov there. Gosh, there was a great oh gosh, what's going on here? Okay. Sorry, but I'm so sorry about this, my friends. I'm just having a little bit of technical issue here with my computer. My computer is now not letting me see the early part of the chat, so I can only see the second half of the chat. So if I skip your comment, I really apologize. Oh gosh, sometimes technology can be a real bummer. So let's see here. So if I skip over your comment, I apologize, but I can only start from a certain point of the chat midway. So let's see here. Nazarene Prod says, oh gosh, maybe the comment. Sorry about that. Stefan Moon is here. Hello, Stefan. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well, my friend. It's nice to see you. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, there we go. Okay. And let's see. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm just, yeah, again, technical issues here. I apologize. While I am going through this, I'm just going through the chat here. This is a great chat as always. Gosh, you guys are great. Retro Player 72, yes, the Red Shoes ballet in the middle just has to be one of the best choreographed and mesmerizing sequences in film. That is a very bold statement, but one that I wouldn't disagree with. Yes. Gosh, this is great. All right. Okay. Je vous aime says, in that stair scene, Vicky is not human anymore. We can't see her face. She is possessed by Lermontov, the shoes, and by Julian, the overture music. It's the reason why the scene is so scary. Yes, Je vous aime, I think you're really making some excellent comments here, as always. Excellent comments here, because it obviously you've shown that. You said that this is your favorite film ever, and it shows because your passion is great. Yes, Lermontov represents the dance, Julian represents the music, and we've seen this tension play out in various aspects of the film earlier. The discussion over breakfast, music versus dance. At the very beginning with the students, when they're watching The Heart of Fire, the dance. The dance students sitting on one side, the music students sitting on the other side. Yes, and here, yes, Lermontov and Julian, dance and music, the clash between the two, and they are fighting over the soul of Vicky, who at the point at the end of the film that you're talking about is arguably no longer Vicky. She has been taken over by the Red Shoes, and that is exemplified by that moment when we see the close-up of her face and the close-up of her shoes as she runs off down the stairs. It's almost like a robot. She seems not to, and it's almost like, right, and this has been said many times, does she kill herself, or is it the shoes that is doing it, which is, in either way, it's a frightening thing, a frightening moment. And so, gosh, Je vous aime, you make a great point here. A great point here, as always. Thank you very much for that. Wonderful. Let's see here. Oh gosh. All right, here we go. You know, the end sequence, I should say here, you know, the end sequence is, I think, to me, I think it was Paula who said, perhaps, if I'm mistaken, please forgive me, but I actually think that the end sequence is its own dance sequence in and of itself, because we see, in essence, Vicky running around. It leads to her doom, of course, but that feels like its own dance sequence. And I think the staircase that Je vous aime alludes to, that lovely spiral staircase, is robotic. It's ballet-like. It's dance-like. The way it goes down like this. It's amazing. How do they? Gosh, it's still. I'm talking about people walking down or running down a flight of stairs. How do they do that? It's amazing. Anyway. So I feel like that's in and of itself, it's its own dance sequence, and it leads to the huge climactic moment, the great tragic moment of the film, and then the epilogue, if you will, is the final performance of the Red Shoes, sans Vicky. So yes, so I feel like that is the dark half, the dark side of the Red Shoes, whereas the middle portion is the exuberant, celebratory nature of the performance of Red Shoes. But that's my own take about it. Yes. So okay. So going back to the the chat here. Yes. Oh gosh, this is great. Great stuff. Great stuff. Yes, there's a great conversation here about about Anton Walbrook as Lermontov here. So, and Kubrick lover is here. Hello. Dan White here is here. Hello. It's nice to see you both. I hope you're doing well. And J Manxy, J Man XYZ2 says, I think the close-up on Massine's character staring at the camera and waving his hands is one of Powell Pressburger's creepiest images. So is this the moment where, are you referring to where he is as the shoemaker? Because yes, Massine's performance as Lubov the dancer performing the shoemaker is really one of the it's a really creepy image. Very creepy, very scary. And it's truly one of a kind, memorable image. Yeah, very well done. And J-Man XYZ2 says, I bet you all have already talked about this, but have you seen Powell Pressburger's The Tale of Hoffmann? It stars a lot of the same ballet figures. No, we haven't spoken about The Tales of Hoffmann, my friend. It's a separate film. You know, it's of course very related. And, you know, I think even, you know, the conducting there is very reminiscent of how Julian conducts the Red Shoes at the beginning at the overture, at the premiere of the Red Shoes. But no, we haven't spoken about that. Maybe one of these days we can talk about the Tales of Hoffmann. T Montana SF, hello, how are you doing, my friend? Anton Walbrook's motivations are never truly explained or fully explored. Is it jealousy that drives him to his lowest levels of evilldom or desperate desire for perfection? That is an excellent point, T Montana SF. We never get the backstory, if you will, about Lermontov, do we? We never get that. We never get anything about his life or his upbringing, why he is the way he is. And I think that makes him so fascinating. one of the lines which I read earlier, which I'll read again, which I think alludes a little bit to what might be the case with this character. He says, this is again in Paris, during the dress rehearsal of Giselle, I think, is it Giselle? After Borinskaya announces that she's going to get married. And Lermontov says, the dancer who relies on the doubtful comforts of human love will never be a great dancer. Doubtful comforts of human love. Now that's a peculiar turn of phrase, is it not? Doubtful comforts of human love. Now, that suggests to me, perhaps, maybe, that maybe once upon a time, there was a time in Lermontov's life where he was trying to rely on the comforts of human love. But for whatever reason, that reliance turned into doubt. Therefore, he is now expressing it in terms of doubtful comforts. So there is a possibility, yes, that maybe back in the day, he was trying to rely on the comforts of love that Borinskaya and later Vicky will be found to be relying upon. But now he doesn't, for whatever reason, inexplicable as it is, which I think makes his character more towering, more mysterious, and dare I say it, also more seductive, right? It goes to the idea of art. Again, I go back to the great comments by Ian Christie in the commentary, right? Art, ballet, the idea of seduction, sacrifice, and luck. Seduction being a huge part of it. The characters of Julian and Vicky are seduced into this world by Lermontov. Lermontov is the ultimate seducer. The way he acts, the way he carries himself, it's the ultimate act of seduction. So, yes, and the fact that he is so mysterious, I think, makes his seduction all the more powerful, if you know what I mean. But yes, T. Montana SF, brilliant, brilliant column. Thank you so much for this. And then Wolfgratz says, it's perfection, I think. There's no good, evil, or desire, just art. Yes. Oh, gosh. Thank you so much here. And just going through the comments here again. And J. Manx XYZ2 says, but some, like Ian Christie refers to in the commentary, argue that there is a fetishistic or obsessive dimension to it as well. Yes, very good, yes. And I mentioned this before, but remember the scene as an example, J. Manx XYZ2. Remember the scene where he is caressing the foot, the statue foot. It's fetishistic. It's almost phallic. It's quite odd if one steps back and thinks about it. So it does go to the odd obsessive nature. Again, remember he describes early on ballet is his religion, and so yes, very good point, JMX6YZ2. Very good point. Yes, Julius M said, we didn't say anything about Ludmila Cherina. What do you think of her? Yes, of course. Yes, Borinskaya. So I mentioned her a little bit in before, but I mentioned her in the fact that in the context of the character person, but she is never seen in any unsympathetic light. She is quite sympathetic. She is such a lovely character, and and I mentioned this before too, but there's a moment when she's backstage and the person at the door, checking everyone who goes in and out of the theater. This is at Covent Garden, I think. Is it Covent Garden? Yes, I think it's Covent Garden. And we see Borinskaya arrive, and she has this lovely rapport with that old man at the door there, talking about the picture, and she asks him, did your wife get jealous about the picture? And I just love that rapport. It just shows her humanity and shows her warmth, and it shows that she is not a rival. Again, I mentioned it earlier, but the film could have gone in so many ways, right? It could have turned into this rivalry between Borinskaya, Ludmila Cherina character, and Victoria Page Moira Shearer character, but it doesn't do that at all. In fact, I think there are very few scenes of two of them together. But yes, of course, Ludmila Cherina, yes, of course, very famous. It's amazing, also taking a step back, also taking JMax XYZ2's comment as well, and also Paula and Justin Peterson and everyone else here as well. But taking a step back to think, this film also the Tales of Hoffmann later. But this film, Red Shoes, it's amazing to see all these actual ballet dancers, these performers, acting in this film, which is about a ballet company. But these are actual dancers. And it's really amazing to see, you know, Charina and Massine and Moria Shearer, of course, and Robert Helpman. But we see all these dancers here actually doing their dance, and they are acting. And so Powell and Pressburger had to find dancers. They wouldn't have be able to pull it off. You needed to have a strong ballet background to be able to do this. And it's really amazing to think that we get these great performances. Like, for instance, you know, Massine's performance here, I think it's really lovely. As an actor, I think it's so lovely and charming. And it's mentioned in the great essay, by the way, here. But the fact that the dancer's named Lubov, right? He is so charming and sympathetic and so playful and witty and almost lovable in a way. And the fact that he is cast as the demonic shoemaker indicates the Machiavellian wretchedness of Lermontov, the fact that he would take such a sweet, lovable person, the dancer, and cast him in this evil role. That's a really nice, and so therefore that's an indication, according to the essay anyway, of the true Machiavellian ruthless calculations on the part of Lermontov. I think that's. But I mention that because I think Massine's characterization is truly breathtaking and really marvelous, and I love it. So. Yes, Juvuzem, thank you very much for that. Yes, Ludmila Charina, of course, of course. I mean, you know, again, I'm not a ballet expert, but of course there are ties here with the real-life ballet. You know, Massine's ties to the Ballet Russe and Diaghilev, and of course the background of Diaghilev and Ballet Russe and Jinsky and Pavlova and, you know, all these great dancers. Yes, really wonderful, really, really wonderful, and really great. Cooper Glover, 1972, says, I should really watch this again. Yes, oh gosh, great. And Cooper Glover, 1972, you said earlier that Jack Cardiff was a great cinematographer and he and Powell and Pressburger were really good technically with their films. Yes, I agree, and The Red Shoes is no exception to that. Brilliant, brilliant collaboration. Juvuzem says Lermontov is like Hoffmann or Debrecar in Black Narcissus, and or Mark in Peeping Tom. He hopes something from a human being that is perfection. It's far from the artistic creation. It's control. Well said, Juvuzem. Juvuzem, I detect a Powell and Pressburger expert in you. My goodness, my goodness. And Paula says, rightly, Juvuzem, really enjoying your comments and take on the film. Yes, here, Paula. And yours too, Paula. I enjoy your comments too. Really well done. B Movie Archives. Hello, it's nice to see you. Hello, nice. Thank you for joining. Yes, really lovely. Really lovely. And there's mention here of Grade 1951's channel, YouTube channel. Wonderful channel, Grade 1951. I love it. I love it. It's really great. So I'm going to have to start to wind this discussion down, unfortunately, very soon because I'm running low on battery power. So unless, actually, what do you think? Should I try to go for another 10 or 15 minutes or so? If so, I might have to just take off my microphone and then switch to, I have to plug in the battery cord, because in order to do that, I might have to take off the microphone. So do you mind if I do that? Actually, the sound is going to be bad, so I really apologize. But let me do this. I'm going to take the microphone out, and I'm going to plug in the power cord, and I'm going to have to change the angle here. So you're going to see the room from a different angle here. So would you do that if you don't mind? Okay, sorry about this. So the sound is going to be bad for the last 15 minutes, but please bear with me. So give me 1 second while I prepare. The battery is off. Okay, excuse me, pardon me, excuse me. Sorry about this. Sorry, this is very embarrassing. Oops. Alright, sorry about this, my friends. Doing the best I can here. Okay. Whoops. I'm very sorry, my friends, for this wobbly camera and the like. But I hope you can forgive me because I want to, and the poor sound as well because the microphone is now out. But I hope you can forgive me because I do want to finish this conversation. There we go. Now, is that better? Can you? I hope you can hear me okay. But again, I apologize because I just had to plug the power cord in, and as a result, I had to take out the mic, so the sound is going to be a little bit poorer in quality. So I really apologize. Please accept please accept my apologies here. But I just want to finish the I want to finish the conversation for the last 10 minutes or so because it's almost 8 o'clock and I do want to go out and walk the dog. So let's just go to the comments here before I kind of round down the conversation. Gosh. Thank you very much. Thank you, Cooper Glover 1972. Paula, thank you. B Movie Archives, thank you. T Montana SF, thank you. Retro Player 72, thank you. Gosh, Wolfgratz, thank you. And a whole new view, yes. So these are the Laserdiscs, and in fact, the Red Shoes is here. Here is the Red Shoes, the Laserdisc. So this is great. This has the audio commentary track, the Ian Christie, Moira Shearer, Brian Easdale, Martin Scorsese, Jack Cardiff, etc., and Maris Goring also. That patchwork commentary, and this is one of the most glorious Laserdiscs that Criterion ever released. This is Criterion Laserdisc spine number 249, and it's glorious because you look here. Look at this. Look at that. It opens up like this, and then opens up again. Excuse me. It doesn't end there. It goes like this. Amazing. This is one of the greatest Criterion Collection Laserdisc releases that they ever did. Glorious. Absolutely glorious. Very fitting for this glorious film, is it not? But anyway, my friends, sorry about that moment there. Yes. So, gosh. Thank you. Oh, T Montana SF, did I say walk me the dog? Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I meant to say walk the dog. So anyway, so now going back to the Red Shoes before we call it a day here, as it were. So to conclude or sort of wind down the discussion of the Red Shoes, I guess how can we wind this down? I feel so worked up actually about this film because it excites me so much. It is a work that is, I think, whoops, gosh, sorry about that. Sorry. There we go. Sorry about that. It's a work that impresses me to no end, and this is from my position, and I'm not in any way an expert on dance. I'm not an expert on ballet. I only enjoy, or I'm not an expert in opera necessarily. I enjoy performance, and I enjoy the performances here and the aspects of performance here. But again, in the context of this film, and so, and I appreciate the fact that it does go into this world, this ballet world, and I appreciate also the fact that it doesn't take the turns that a film that of this nature would I expect to take. In other words, as I mentioned before, it doesn't turn it into this kind of backstage cutthroat, backstabbing rivalry film. It's essentially it takes it puts it in pure terms, the nature of art and the pursuit of art and the lengths which one will go in order to pursue that art. And here it's in the context, as I say, I think Je vous aime frames it rather beautifully. Lermontov represents dance, Julian represents music, and Vicky is the subject of their battle. It's the battle for her soul, and Vicky, I think, I mean, she loves dance, but she loves performance also. So, and she loves dance and she loves Julian. So she's caught in the middle, in a very interesting triangle that is metaphorical on many levels of metaphor. And so, therefore, this film, I think, on a narrative level, in a narrative thematic level, I think is very rich and rewarding. And if we take a step back and we look at it in the context of the creation of art, I think it works very well in the context of cinema and this notion of creation of art in cinema. And if we also think about the backstage stories that we hear in the production process, and in particular, I urge you to research the history behind the relationship between Michael Powell and Moira Shearer. It's a very interesting relationship and how that relationship was, in particular, in this film. So, and it mirrors very closely, I think, the kind of artistic depictions that are depicted in this film. And so, that is to say, I think that this film seems to represent the artistic temperament in a way that I think is more closer to life than I might have otherwise have initially appreciated at the time. I'm not an artist per se, but it seems like there's a lot going on here that I think a lot of people who are artists can tend to appreciate more. And that might explain why a lot of filmmakers see this as being one of the greatest films ever made. And that might explain, as an example, why in the commentary, Martin Scorsese expressed how much he really admired the obsessive nature of Lermontov. He is a filmmaker who is, I think, by reputation, a very demanding filmmaker because he too is an artist. So I'm not saying that Martin Scorsese is just like Lermontov or anything like that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I've never met Martin Scorsese, but my point is that there seems to be an artistic temperament on display here that is not necessarily out of the ordinary, shall we say? So there is that. Also, in terms of a cinematic experience, as I was alluding to, it's true in the ballet sequence as well, but I think it doesn't exist there. It's not exclusive to the ballet sequence. It is all throughout the film. This film touches on many tones and many moods. It it's amazing to me how it is both surreal and real. Real in the sense that it goes into the backstage nitty gritty of backstage ballet company life. We go into the streets, we see Covent Garden and the fruit market, we see people rehearsing, we see the backstage lights and the production, and Rathoff going off about the design and the painting and the production process, the way things work, the wood, the we hear the nails, and we see the people stitching and all this stuff. So we see all this real life stuff on the one hand. On the other hand, we see the surreal, unreal aspects, the fantasy aspects of ballet. Maybe it's subjective, but I think to limit the conversation there, I think wouldn't serve the purpose of the film, because I think on an alternative level, in viewing this film, it is a commentary, I think, on the power of cinema and the grandeur and the scope and the potential of cinema to show us the real and the nitty gritty on the one hand, but then showing us the dreamlike and the surreal landscape and the beauty and the horror and the mystery of surreality on the other. And it's a mix of these different tones in a way that blends in an act, I think, of true cinematic poetry that makes the Red Shoes, in many ways, a kind of fundamental work in cinema. I think it's one of the most fundamental works in cinema. Powell and Pressburger have made a number of super masterpieces. One of these days, I'd love to talk about the Powell and Pressburger films in the Criterion Collection and elsewhere. and included in which I would have to include Peeping Tom, the Michael Powell film Peeping Tom. But Powell and Pressburger as a duo created some true masterworks of cinema. But, and I haven't made up my mind yet, but dare I say it, perhaps, maybe, The Red Shoes could be my favorite Powell and Pressburger film. It could be. I'm not sure yet, but it could very well be my favorite Powell and Pressburger film. And it's a tough competition, mind you. You've got The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp in there. You've got Black Narcissus in there. You've got A Matter of Life and Death in there. 49th Parallel in there. You know, all this. I know where I'm going, my goodness. But, and others, but Tales of Hoffmann. But, yeah, there's something about the Red Shoes that it's almost like it is so I'm so able to enter its world almost immediately. You know, I'm not an artist, I'm not a dancer, but I can understand this notion, at least on a very sort of simplistic level, this notion of the pursuit of art. And I can understand it in those emotional terms, the narrative terms that the film places it in. You know, this love triangle among Vicky, Lermontov, and Julian. And I can understand the visual language, or I can appreciate the visual language that's at play here in terms of the red shoes and the explosive visual style of it that I think blends everything that this film is about into one sequence that is explosive and kinetic. And this film, therefore, is an embodiment of everything I love about Powell and Pressburger. And I'll end with the comment that I think it was made by Brian Easdale in the commentary about his description of Powell and Pressburger, which is how I started this film club live stream. And I think it was I think it was Brian Easdale who was describing his observations of how Powell and Pressburger worked, right? Because Pressburger was the one who was focused primarily more on the story beats and the narrative and how the narrative flowed, whereas Powell was more focused on the visual elements. Not to say that each was focused exclusively in those departments. There was much overlap, to be sure, but that was generally where their focus was, at least as Brian Easdale seems to describe it, at least in the context of the making of this particular film. So, my friends, that is, to me, in a nutshell, what this film is about. It is an example of narrative flourish and verve, and its visual style is just superb and really a technical feat. But it's not only a technical feat, it turns into something that transcends its technical accomplishments, if that is indeed possible, because the technical accomplishments are indeed so high and are at the summit of technical accomplishments. But it seems to transcend it in a way that makes it utterly extraordinary as a cinematic viewing experience. That is the Red Shoes for me, and that is why I find it to be so important in the context of cinema, and that is why I think it could be my favorite Powell and Pressburger film. So, anyway, that's just my wind down of that. So let me just go here and just go to your comments here, and we'll go from there. Gosh. So just going to the chat here. So again, I apologize for the chat and my own technical deficiencies here, but if I missed your comment at any time during this live stream chat, I really apologize. It was not my intention. If I've missed a comment or question that you think is worth discussing, please feel free to leave it in a comments section in the video. I'd really love to hear that. So anyway, my friends, let's just go to the comments here and go from there. So J-Man XYZ2 says, I must say I prefer the Laserdisc cover over the Blu-ray cover. Yes, you know, I mean, I didn't mention it. I don't usually like to criticize Blu-ray covers. You know, I just feel like, yeah, the Laserdisc cover is a little bit more my cup of tea, but that's just me. Oh, it's okay. Come on. Come on. Come on. Yo. Hold on for 1 minute. We have a guest here, so if you don't mind, let my guest join us as we wind down this conversation. Iyo. Oh, ohayo. Oops. Whoops. Sorry about that. Here we go. All right. Do you want to say something? What do you want to say? Hello?
Hello.
What's your name?
My name
Whoa, my name's Leo, and the camera's not good. Sorry about the camera here, so let me just fix that there. Great. We're at a kind of canted angle here. It's like sorry about this, we'll just have to tilt the angle here because of the poor camera work of Leo's dad here. I am a poor cameraman. I'm a poor director of photography. I'm nowhere near the skill level of Jack Carter, that's for sure. I can never be. But there we go. Excuse me here while I adjust this. And again, I apologize for my poor technical things. Okay, there we go. There we go. So, Leo, say hello.
Hello.
So, how are you doing today?
Wonderful.
You're good? Alright, good. 大丈夫？これから散歩するから、いい？まだ雨降ってないけどいいよね。小春の散歩行こう。ね。あと5分。いい？よし、はい、タッチ。よし。Okay, so let me just return to the let's see the comments here and we'll call it a day. And Paula says, this chat has definitely made me want to rewatch the film again. Well, that makes me so happy, Paula. Thank you so much. Your comments were great, by the way. Always great, Paula. Great. RetroPlayer72 says, Paula, me too. Another great film club, guys. Thank you, Daisuke, and thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, RetroPlayer72. Fantastic to talk with you, as always. Lincoln Gogo. Daisuke, I own a couple of Powell and Pressburger Criterions and have watched many clips and read up lots on them, but haven't watched any of their films yet. Where would you recommend me to start? Red Shoes, also Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, and yeah, I think those would be the great places to start. So I hope you enjoy your Powell and Pressburger journey. And thank you very much, Lincoln Gogo. It's really nice to talk with you. Let's see. Solitary Rodent Film says, Morishir and Peeping Tom 2, another Powell masterwork. Yes, I have many complex feelings about Peeping Tom. Maybe we can address those in another video one day. Maybe that can be another film club live stream one of these days. Who knows? But yes, she does appear in Peeping Tom too in a very important key role. Je vous aime says it's so modern in every way, referring to the Red Shoes. 1948's audience didn't know this was a big date in cinema history. Yes, this is a huge moment, a landmark, a milestone in many ways. J-Manx XYZ2 says, to me, it's a film of spellbinding character. Oh, great. T Montana SF. Gene Kelly found this movie to be so great, he said he saw it over and over again. He told MGM executives to see the Red Shoes, and the Metro executives found it just as beautiful. Yes, well done. JMax XYZ2, surreal and real, really good way of putting it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Let's see. Wolfgrat says, True Confessions, I've never taken to an American in Paris. Okay. Maybe American in Paris. Maybe, I should talk more about musicals on this channel, by the way. But Wolfgratz, you are a legend and a friend, as always, my dear friend. Let's see here. Gosh. Yes, there's talk about my dog. Okay. Yeah, it's... maybe one day I'll mention my dog in a video, but my dog's not in this room at the moment. She's still sleeping, but yes. All right, so great. Peter, thank you very much. Peter, you brought up the comment about the characters in the film that jump-started this conversation. So Peter, I want to thank you very much. Cooper Clever 1972どうもありがとうです。どういたしました。どうもありがとうございました。またよろしくお願いいたします。It was really nice to see you. And okay, so very good, guys. So let's call it a day. Je vous aime. Thank you very much. This live stream made my night. Thanks, everyone. It was so good to talk about that film with you all. Goodbye. Yes, thank you very much. Je vous aime. It was great to talk about this film with you. This is your favorite film, apparently. So well done. Well done to you and to all of you. So let's see. It's now it's 7:56 now. And I apologize very much, my friends, for my poor camera work at the end. You know, I am, as I said, I am no Jack Cardiff, so I apologize for that. And again, please welcome my special guest here. And he and I will probably now take the dog for a walk. Now, just as a little bit of housekeeping, please note that I will be, right? Is that okay? Okay. So please note that I will be figuring out the next live stream film club schedule for July. And I'll make an announcement about that as soon as I can. I'm receiving a lot of comments about suggestions from you and from others about what you would like to talk about next. And I've just made the point, again, it's a very arbitrary thing, but I've just made the point to stick with the Criterion Collection for now. But that's just because just it's the Criterion Collection. I thought it might be easy for people to access. But maybe later down the line, and I've thought about this before, but maybe later down the line we can talk about films that are not necessarily in the Criterion Collection. So I'm basically open to everything and anything. But for now, anyway, at least for July, let's focus on something that is in the Criterion Collection. And then we'll think about what we can do for August and beyond. Again, I think this film club is totally, it's not, this is something that is not about me and me alone. It's something that is a collaboration between and among all of us, and I really believe that. And so this would be nothing without you and your participation and support and great enthusiasm. And so I do want to rely upon your suggestions going forward. So I will look at those suggestions that you've sent to me in earnest. So thank you very much for that, and I will look at those. And I'll try to make a poll, but if I don't make a poll this time, please forgive me, but maybe I'll try to integrate that into some aspect of the decision making later on. But for now, maybe I'll make a decision and then start a poll or something later on. So, okay, my friends, that's it. And until what's the line? Until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And I really mean that. You know, there's a lot of good things happening in the world, but a lot of not so good things happening in the world. So I know sometimes things can be stressful and tough. So even in those times, my friends, in any event, most important to please take good care of yourselves. Really, take good care of yourselves, and please be well. And you know, whether it's sunshine or whether it's raining, there will always be good movies to watch. So anyway, my friends, I hope you are watching a lot of great movies and that you are well. And my friends, my dear friends, it is always a pleasure to talk to you. It's so great. So thank you very much. And until we meet again, cheers and have a great rest of your day. All right, so that's it. Thank you very much, my friends. And we're going to wind down. All right, you want to say goodbye? Do you want to say anything?
Yes.
Yes, what do you want to say?
Rehearsal.
Rehearsal? Can you speak English or can you speak Japanese or both?
Yes.
Yes? Oh, great. That's great. You're so smart. You're so smart. You know that? You want to go for a walk now?
Yes.
Okay, all right, let's go for a walk. All right, get up. Oh, ow. My knee. All right, you want to go?
Yeah.
Okay, here, do 5.
Bye.
Bye. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, bye. Bye. Here. All right. I'll see you in a second. Okay, we'll go put the leash on the dog. Okay. All right, my friends. So thank you very much, and I will see you again at the next one. So please be well. All right. Take care. Bye bye.